I would like to call the meeting to order. It is 10 o'clock a.m. I ask that as a courtesy to all that you ensure that you've silenced your cell phones. Also, I would like to remind our directors to turn their microphone on each time they speak to help with the audio and video recordings. For the record, I'll note that the public meeting notice was properly posted as required by law, and the notice of this board meeting was provided to each one of our directors. At this time, I would like to ask Director Huber to deliver the invocation, just right when you put peanuts in your mouth.
Let's pray. Our Heavenly Father, we're so thankful for the opportunity to be here today and fellowship with each other, conduct business. We thank you for the privilege of serving on this board and serving our fellow Texans in this way. We ask you to give us wisdom as we deliberate and make decisions today. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you. Directors Mike Fernandez, Helen Jimenez, and Mike Kahn indicated that they would not be present for this meeting. Before we proceed to the agenda, I would like to welcome our new board member, Kenny Weldon. Welcome. Kenny's from Stephenville. We're very happy to have you. Thank you for serving Texas. Okay, we've reached the portion of our meeting where we've set aside time to hear from you, the general public, those interested in providing comments by filling out one of the cards available at the receptionist desk. I have not received any comments. Anybody want to speak? All right. Then we will move forward to the first agenda item, report and possible discussion on Water Services Department overview by Aaron Abel, Water Services Manager. Good morning, Aaron.
Good morning. Presiding officer, I'm going to steal just a moment of his airtime. We're going to start a new series at our board meetings that aren't overwhelmed with the big agenda items. I've asked different departments to come and talk to you a little bit about their department. Not necessarily the things that you see or read about in the GM updates or the stuff that you hear when we're here in front of you asking for approvals, but all the things that they do that make their department so busy and so unique and so important. So today, throughout the day, you're going to hear from a lot of you're going to see a lot of new faces that you don't know, and that'll be evident here in agenda item number 1. You'll get to know some more of our experts. So I'm excited about what you're fixing to hear. Aaron?
Thanks, David. Before we begin, I want to introduce the members of Water Services. We have some folks that are here, not everybody, but I'm going to point them out. So Philip Price is our Senior Water Resources Engineer. Chris Higgins is our Lead Hydrologist. I see Pam Hahnemann is our Water Resources Regional Planner. Peyton Lisenby is our Senior Water Resources Planner. And then we have Allison Caldera, our Water Accounting Specialist. And then Travis Behrman is our hydrologist, new to Water Services in the last month or so. So Julie Andrus is also a Water Accounting Specialist that couldn't make it today. But in this presentation, we want to present the major objectives and processes that fall under Water Services, emphasizing some of the things that you might not be familiar with in terms of Water Services. So I think everybody understands our mission statement with BRA's strategic plan, and what we do in Water Services really encapsulates that to develop, manage, and protect the water resources of the Brazos River Basin. We're responsible for the day-to-day management and operations of the raw water supply system. We are also responsible for major water supply development projects, such as the Lake Whitney reallocation project, and we play key roles in regional water planning. The protection and maintenance of our water right authorizations, which is the backbone of our water supply, is also a role that we take in Water Services as far as protecting and maintaining our authorizations. So this presentation will walk you through the many aspects and roles in Water Services. You're not going to hear from me anymore. I'm going to have Peyton Lisenby and Chris Higgins come up and kind of walk you through what we do. Peyton is our senior water resources planner, and he's going to mainly focus on the aspects of developing and protecting our water supply with a couple of intricacies on operations. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. So I'm going to be handling the first cluster of slides for this presentation. As Aaron mentioned, a lot about how we operate our reservoirs during floods, how we look after our water rights, and then Chris Higgins will follow me up with about how we actively manage our system supply. So in essence, I am essentially just the warm-up act for Chris's presentation. Let's see if we can. There we go. So I'll start off with what can be one of our most involved tasks, and that is coming up with appropriate release configurations to safely pass floodwaters through our reservoirs. What's unique about flood ops, as we call it, is that we don't have to do it all the time. But when we do, it takes all of our attention, right? Nights, weekends, during the day, doesn't matter. It commands all of our attention. We do have several operating principles that we rely on, several of which are listed here. And we adhere to these regarding how we make decisions and to guide us on what we have to pay particular attention to. The release decisions we make are critical, not only for maintaining the integrity of our infrastructure, but also for determining the role that our reservoirs play in how flood waves propagate downstream. We don't have flood control at our reservoirs. So the main overarching goal is we pass floods without exacerbating them. Now, during this process, we ingest a good bit of data, a good bit of information. We have lake elevation data from our own internal SCADA systems. We also get it from USGS gauges, upstream contributing stream flow, inflow and reservoir forecasts from the National Weather Service and the river forecast centers, rainfall data, even wind data. And we take all of this information to account when we're making these release decisions. The image down here on the lower right, this is a spit out of one of our reservoir operations models, in this case for Lake Granbury. And this is a model that allows us to overlay a lot of those data sets that I've mentioned. In this case, reservoir elevation, contributing stream flow, reservoir release, computed inflows. All of this information can be overlain to help us configure the gate opening sequences at our reservoirs in what best can be described as a mass balance exercise. We match what's coming into the reservoir with what we're releasing from the reservoir. That's flood ops in a nutshell. And it is unique among some of the other tasks that we're going to walk through in the next few slides. All right. So the next few slides are going to deal a lot with how we look after our water rights. The Brazos Basin is fully allocated. What that means is there isn't any readily available, reliable surface water supply that remains. Additionally, Brazos River Authority is the largest water right holder in the basin in terms of how much we're authorized to store and in terms of how much we're authorized to divert. And what that means is Brazos River Authority has potentially greater exposure to being impacted whenever other water rights change, whenever they're amended in different locations at different times. There are over 1,500 other water rights in the Brazos Basin, and we're all stacked together, elbow to elbow, if you will. And when somebody changes their stance, amends their water rights, the impact of that can reverberate to other water right holders. All right, and because we're the largest water right holder, we have a little bit greater exposure to that. So these amendments that I'm talking about could be simple things, simple changes to diversion location, changes to diversion rate, but it's really anything that's different from the original water right authorization. If that changes, that water right's amended. So water services staff, we monitor water right amendment applications using TCEQ's website. We look at the pending amendment applications, we analyze what's being changed, and then we assess them for their potential to impact BRA's water rights, our 16 different water authorizations. And because we do this, we've actually, in the past few years, have been able to perform some early intervention, to notice, to kind of see the writing on the wall, see some potential impact, reach out to TCEQ, reach out to the applicant, and actually resolve these impacts before they're completed, before the final permit was issued on that amendment application. So this is one area where we can be really proactive in protecting our water rights. Now, and related to that, water services staff, we routinely perform water rights modeling. The TCEQ water availability models, the WAMs, are the official representation of all water authorizations in the Brazos Basin. The model, the WAM, contains all of the water rights information for the entire basin at a monthly time step for a 79-year period of record from 1940 through the end of 2018. So our paper water rights tell us what BRA is authorized to use. The WAM tells BRA how much water is available to us based on those water rights and the prevailing conditions of the basin. For example, prevailing hydrology, other senior water rights in the basin, and environmental flow requirements. So we use WAM to establish for BRA what is our baseline water availability. We take our 16 water rights, analyze those in the WAM, and that tells us as a baseline comparison point how much water we have available to us. And we can use that to compare to changes that occur in the basin. For example, those pending amended water right applications. So the Brazos WAM for us is the mechanism we use, not only to understand what we're authorized to use water-wise, but also to communicate potential impacts to our water rights internally, to TCEQ, or to other external parties. And the WAM is the vehicle that we use to communicate the extent or the severity of impact when we're trying to avoid or trying to have those early intervention type strategies to get around that. Additionally, Water Services uses WAM to keep up with not only amendment applications, but also updated hydrology data and reservoir sedimentation data. So Water Services also maintains our understanding of reservoir sedimentation. We want to have an up-to-date understanding of the relationship between how much water our lakes store versus lake elevation and the dynamic of how that relationship changes over time. A lot of that's related to the rate at which our reservoirs accumulate sedimentation. So the image here, this is just an example of a reservoir, part of our system, and its storage trace over time. This is an output of that WAM model. And so you can see reservoir storage traces can change dramatically over time. Storage can change dramatically with prevailing hydrology, essentially how much water is flowing into the reservoir, but also water right usage. How much water are you diverting? How much are you pumping away from the reservoir for water supply needs? Now, at any given time, there may be one or more studies going on in the Brazos Basin that have the potential to impact BRA operations or the yield of our water supply system. Okay, and BRA can be involved in these studies to different extents, depending on the type of study and BRA's contribution. Water Services staff, we represent BRA in these studies as a stakeholder, which means we may contribute data or help review data. We, of course, participate in the meetings, and we review and comment on any kind of final reports that are generated from these studies. And there's a good handful going on right now. BRA is currently a participating stakeholder in the Corps of Engineers' ongoing FERO study, which is Forecast Informed Reservoir Operations, the Nature Conservancy Sustainable Rivers Program Environmental Flows Study, the Water Development Board's Reservoir Evaporation Study, and the Water Development Board's Brazos Basin Streamflow Trend Study, and the Army Corps of Engineers' Drought Contingency Study for core reservoirs. Now, of those litany of studies I just mentioned, the two examples here on the bottom left, this is a diagram from the Corps' FERO study. And what that study is examining is the feasibility in Texas to temporarily, sometimes, increase the level of the conservation pool in core reservoirs so you can kind of insulate the existing conservation storage from forecasted drought conditions. If we can forecast drought conditions well enough into the future, can we temporarily increase storage to protect the supply that's there? That's essentially the basis for FERO. The image here on the right, this is an output from the Water Development Board's, among other partners, Reservoir Evaporation Study, which is seeking to find new and improved ways that we can measure and model evaporation from our reservoir surfaces. And that's actually, it's easy to say, but it's very tricky to do. It's one of the more difficult quantities to get a hold of. Now, BRA may also make financial contributions to these studies. And the example I'll give here is in the past, BRA has contributed money to help study the Brazos River alluvial aquifer. We've done that with partnered with Baylor University in the past to do that. All right, so additionally, in accordance with TCEQ dam safety regulations and as part of BRA's kind of continuous coordination with state, county, and city level emergency management folks, BRA commissions studies in hydrology and hydraulics on our 3 reservoirs. These studies are managed by Water Services folks and analyze magnitude and impacts of possible dam breach scenarios at our reservoirs, the probable maximum flood scenarios at our reservoirs, and then the associated downstream inundation associated with breach scenarios or PMF, probable maximum flood events. So the map you see here is a product of one such study. This was a breach scenario, modeled breach scenario at Morris Shepherd Dam at Possum Kingdom Lake during the probable maximum flood event, the largest flood that we could reasonably suspect might occur in the future. And the lines you see here, the blue lines, show the extent of the inundation downstream. These are very useful maps. What this allows us to do when we coordinate with emergency management folks is to show them where you may have logistical challenges due to inundation of roads and bridges. That allows the emergency management folks to better come up with evacuation plans so that they can actually get supplies or folks routed during the times of these types of events. Okay, so we use these all the time when we actually go and coordinate with emergency management folks. And that's why it's important we maintain these types of studies over time. All right, now like Aaron mentioned earlier, as part of our BRA's mission to develop water resources in the Brazos Basin, Water Services staff routinely conduct analyses and manage projects that are aimed at augmenting existing BRA supplies. So these projects center around evaluating possible supply acquisitions, namely addressing what new yield's available and how does that yield integrate into our existing system yield. So a good example is our current reallocation feasibility study at Lake Whitney. This study looks at what are the current allocations in Lake Whitney, and this is led by the Corps of Engineers. BRA serves as the non-federal sponsor. So we look at the current allocations and we examine how can these be reproportioned to benefit water supply. Another example of these types of studies is when we assess potential acquisitions or purchases of new water rights. What's the yield of those water rights? And how does that yield change or how does it augment the existing water supply system that we currently have configured? Now, one of the major planning efforts that's managed through Water Services is the regional water planning and regional flood planning efforts in the state. So the Brazos River Authority serves as it's the political subdivision, and it serves as the administrative agent for the Brazos G Regional Water Planning Group, and we serve as the administrative sponsor for the Lower Brazos Flood Planning Group. Pam Hanneman, who was introduced earlier, she is the point person. She's the one representing BRA in this task, which includes coordinating updates and maintaining information on each group's website. Regional water planning groups, brazosgwater.org. The flood planning group is lowerbrazosflood.org. She ensures proper hosting and noticing of planning group public meetings is maintained. She also serves as the project manager of the Water Development Board contracts and the consultant contracts associated with these planning efforts. And she serves as the kind of informational point of contact for anybody who needs information about these planning groups, whether that's other agencies, other stakeholders, or the public in general. All right, so the last thing I'll mention here, and that is our responsibility in maintaining our water management plan. The water management plan is a component of our system operation permit, and it establishes the principles that we use to utilize our system operation permit water. Importantly, our SysOps water only exists because BRA is able to manage and use its other water rights in a manner that is efficient and reduces losses so that additional yield is produced. And that is the yield we're authorized to in our SysOps permit. So even though the water management plan only governs our utilization of our system operation permit water, in doing so, it must also integrate how BRA implements its other water rights, our 15 other water right authorizations. So the map here shows the distribution of diversion reaches that are established by our system operation permit. Each of these reaches occur downstream of one of our reservoirs, and each one is associated with an annual maximum diversion limit in acre feet per year. In effect, this network of reaches formalizes the inclusion of the river channel network as part of our water supply system, not just our reservoirs. So together, our reservoirs with these diversion reaches make up the entire BRA water supply system. Now, as a condition of our permit, or our system operation permit, we must update our water management plan every 10 years. And because our water management plan is a part of our system operation permit, an update to the plan is a de facto amendment of the permit. And that's an effort we've actually already started. Late last year, we actually got going on getting our water management plan updated, and we're well underway in that project now. So, to conclude my part, on the left here is our water supply system, made up of our 11 reservoirs plus our diversion reaches downstream. We use the WAM to tell us from this system how much water is available to us. Determining how we use that water requires another step, okay? We have to assess the most efficient ways we can operate our system to maximize the usage of the water that's available to us. So for that, we use the diagram on the right here, our contract analysis tool, or the CAT. This allows us to take the water availability information we get from the WAM and apply operational policies and decisions to produce a data set that describes the distribution of water use limitations basin-wide. Through this work, these analyses, these models, we can actively manage our system supply so we can keep up with changing customer needs and changing basin conditions. And this is the part where Chris is going to come up and take over and actually talk about what goes into managing our system supply. Thanks.
Thank you, Jane. Okay. So Peyton was a professor in his past occupation, so you can't compare our delivery style. It's a little more raw. Let's go ahead. So a little bit more on this contract analysis tool. Its acronym is CAT. The introduction of the SysOps permit that Peyton was just discussing was really a paradigm shift in how we look at the basin and how we manage our water supplies. Prior to the SysOps permit and us actually using it in 2018, the system was a lot simpler. It was more static. For example, like say Lake Belton, its firm yield is about 100,000 acre feet. So we could sell contracts at the lake or downstream of that lake, as so long as the aggregate of all those contracts didn't exceed that 100,000 acre foot. So fast forward, post SysOps, it became a lot more dynamic. So the system operations permit, the availability throughout the basin became, there was a spatial variability built in with it. So in other words, it just changes with where you're located throughout the basin. And so we couldn't simply just sell contracts, like we could before. So we had to develop this model. And we knew ahead of time that we were going to have a tool that could allow us to do this. So we started the development of this in 2017. And our original concept going into it was we wanted to make this as close to reality as a numerical model could be. And so there was a lot of additional considerations that went into it. We had to build in our hydropower operations. We had to build in, our reservoir operational curves. We had to, build in, pipeline operations and other things that your water availability model doesn't, your base water availability model doesn't include. And so essentially we have to use this model to assess availability anytime we have a new contract or amended contract or someone wants to change a diversion. to assess the availability at that specific point. It just allows us to validate and verify availability across the basin. So moving on to the next slide. So the water accounting plan, so this was another, of course, it says it there on the slide. This is part of the system operations permit, just staying on the theme of SysOps. And it's also incorporated, within our conformed water management plan. And it consists of those, 5 workbooks. It's very large, very complex. Within each one of those workbooks, there's 20, 30, 40 plus tabs within them, and they're all interconnected. And so it was a monumental hurdle when we first introduced this into our operations, just learning it and incorporating into what we do. And we developed over time, we tried to streamline it. We developed a lot of pre-processing workbooks. We had to work with the IT department to develop reports that we can ingest into it. And so at first, and then Phil Price, he developed a methodology to go mine return flows from the EPA database, which in itself would have been a huge task. And so we went from, when we first started using this thing in 2018, it would take a couple of days for one guy to update this. Now, we can do it. And Allison, we trained Allison up. She's the one that kind of maintains this and keeps it updated. She can probably do it in less than an hour now. So, but we, the main purpose of this is to make sure that we're operating within the boundaries of our water rights, and we're staying within, our, sorry, I'm still here. Staying within, the special conditions that are built into our water rights. And so it tracks our water use, lakeside and downstream. It tracks, the run of the river flows, return flows. It does the mass balance for our reservoirs, and it routes these all the way through the entire basin, through every single reach, all the way down to the Gulf. And so that's, we'll move on to the next slide. And just monitoring the basin just comes with the territory. That's what we do. That's the first thing that a lot of us do when we get in, in our office in the morning, is we pull this up. This is just a snapshot of our OneRain tool. It's out on our website. It's available to the public. At our user level, we see a lot more, operational type data that others don't see. But we can look at, lake levels, stream flows, and we can look at different conditions within the basin, accumulative rainfall and everything else. And this is, and we all look at it, and we're always looking, we have a lot of special conditions with our water right that require us to release a certain amount from some of our reservoirs. We have water supply operations going on, and then during droughts, and then during flood times, we're especially watching this. There's times where, we're looking at it multiple times throughout the day. But this isn't the only tool that we use. There's other products that we use, developed, usually under the NOAA umbrella. Like the National Weather Service, we're looking at weather forecasting, the West Gulf River Forecast Center, we're looking at stream flow forecasting, and the Climate Prediction Center, we're looking at seasonality and long-term, forecasting. And so there's a lot of other tools that we use just so we can communicate intelligently across the different departments within the BRA to our management team and to others on what the current conditions are throughout the basin. And then moving on along, our water services department, we're extremely data driven. And so this is a critical component to what we do. We collect this data every day, and so those, the storage, the evaporation, rainfall, and reservoir releases are all things we track. We have weather stations at each of our lake projects, at all 3 of them. And then our lake staff there at the projects, they gather that data every morning and enter it into our Water Services database. That's just a snapshot of it in the top right there. And, you know, our IT department developed that, and our very capable programmers back around the 2016 timeframe, and they're all still here in the IT department. This is used to store all the data. And then for all the 8 core reservoirs, this database is set up to go, it's connected to, or it's not really connected per se, but it goes out and grabs all the core data from the core website daily. So we have all of that data incorporated within our database. And then reservoir inflow, that's a calculated component. It does use a mass balance equation, which is the industry standard for measuring inflow. And so, without this data, we couldn't manage the basin effectively. It's critical for being able to determine what the availability is. It goes into the water accounting plan that we just spoke about. It goes into the CAP model. It goes into every component of everything we do. And outside agencies often ask for this data. We have open records requests pretty frequently that we get through the legal department. And so we'll move on along here. So the contracts and customer management, as you can see, we have about 170 contracts, 120 odd divert directly from the lake, the other 49 from the reservoirs, and then you can see kind of our breakdown there of the type of use. It's mainly municipal and industry, and then, you know, a small amount is for irrigation and mining. So, you know, Water Services is part of the process of the initial processing of the contracts. We have a pretty big part in that. I won't get into the details of it, but, you know, after the contract's complete, it's Water Services' duty to ensure that those customers receive the water, you know, that they have under contract for the lifetime of that contract. And so, you know, when the upper basin or central lower basin come to us and with a new contract, we have to run that contract analysis tool to make sure that there's availability within that specific location. And my mouth is getting extremely dry. Hey, will that help? Sorry, guys. It is. All right. It's all about the water. Yeah, H2O, man. Okay. Okay. So, so our contracts, you know, when we're like I said, we have, you know, 121 that divert from the lake. There's not a lot of day-to-day operational considerations for the lakeside contracts. They use the water. They have diversions. They have lakeside intakes like that picture there, and they report what they use. For the downstream customers, it's a whole lot more involved. And so when we get into drought considerations, or when we get into, you know, serious droughts, that's where that comes into play. I'm going to talk more about that in a second on another slide. So water use reporting, I talked about the paradigm shift that the system operation created when it was introduced into our operations. This was another big paradigm shift in the way Water Services had always operated for decades. With the initiation of the Water Master Program in June of 2015, it changed the way that we report our water use. And so this is a big part of what Julie and Allison do. Not all of it, but it's a big part of what they do. You know, for our lakeside users, they have to report, you know, their water use by the 10th of the following month, what they used the previous month, along with their start-stop meter readings. And then we have to do some specific water accounting for various customers. And so all that goes into what we call a POR. It's a pump operation report. And then that gets sent off to the Brazos Water Master. And so for the downstream reporting, it's a lot more involved. It's different. For those customers, they have to report to us not only what they used, they have to report it more frequently, within a week or two of when they use it, and then they have to tell us what they're actually plan on doing for the following week. So they have to give us what they estimate they're going to use. And there's lots of changes. There's things happen. It rains. Their pumps malfunction. Something goes on. So there's a lot of there's continuous coordination between our customers and the Water Master, you know, for the downstream reporting. And all that information goes into what's called a DOI. It's a declaration of intent. And this took not only months, but years to integrate into our system and get everything right, working very closely with the Water Master Program and developing these reports and so forth. Go.
Does anybody have any questions? Water Service Department stuff.
What's the average evaporation rate?
So-
Especially like when the, like 100 degrees outside, clear blue skies.
Well, when you during a hot July, it's going to be about a half an inch a day. Over a month time frame, when you have a hot July and no rain, you're going to lose a little over a foot of water in each of the reservoirs. So it's pretty significant.
Well, I've noticed, I live in Harker Heights, so Stillhouse Lake, I go across that to go see my children in Salado. I've noticed that the levels have come down quite a bit from probably in the last 2 weeks than when they was really full. I don't know if it's down, they're sending it to Georgetown or they're letting it out through the dam, you know.
Yeah, a lot of that's going to be EVAP, but also we have our Williamson, County raw water pipeline that's sending a little bit of that over to Georgetown. And so it's a combination of EVAP. We're not releasing any water, lakeside use, and then that pumping. So you're going to see it decline. If it's not raining, the reservoirs are going to drop, and especially this time of year, pretty significant.
And one more question, if you don't mind. Is there a standard that you have to maintain a certain amount of water in the rivers? Like especially now when it's kind of in a drought? Because typically in Texas, we're like July to October, we don't get very much rain. And if we do, thank God we got some. But do you have to maintain a certain amount of water in the rivers?
Yeah, the short answer to that is no. I mean, we have two reservoirs that have special conditions where you have, like Limestone, we have to release 6 CFS. Aquila, we have a half a CFS requirement. At PK, we have our minimum flow requirement. We release like 28, about 19 CFS from Granbury. But the other reservoirs don't have any requirement, and we don't have a requirement to keep the stream flow at a certain elevation. Our system operation permit doesn't allow us to run a river under the SysOps permit unless we're meeting the environmental flow conditions that are outlined within that permit. And then when the stream flow gets low enough, like it is now, we have to start initiating. And I didn't have time to get into that, but we have to make a water supply operational considerations and determine which reservoir to release water out of to meet our downstream water supply needs. So it's a requirement of our big lower basin customers.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Operation model you mentioned, previous gentleman, that's a model tied into TCEQ that you report daily, weekly, monthly? How does that?
Well, that's part of the study. So currently, evaporation is measured in evaporation pans.
In daily?
Daily, yes. And those pans are not a reservoir. They're next to the reservoir. And what we're actually measuring is the result of evaporation, which is water loss.
It's pretty accurate, what you're saying.
It's accurate to the
According to government standards, it's accurate.
Yes, and it's affordable, it's easily deployable, it's easy to maintain. What the board's evaporation study is looking at is, can we get a better product and actually measure reservoir evaporation instead of using a pan to pretend it's a reservoir and transform the pan's results into what we think might be reservoir evaporation? What if we measured the inputs to evaporation from the reservoir itself and then modeled those inputs to generate a meaningful evaporation value for the reservoir specifically?
Last question, David, probably for you. How much water, or is it measurable, do we lose to the Gulf of Mexico? It just goes from the top, the basin, upper basin, all the way through, and down here, how much goes, what's the loss factor there?
So transport of water through the river system to the Gulf of Mexico is in the order of millions.
Now, how much we lose that we just don't capture just because that's the natural flow of water to the Gulf?
Yeah, millions. It's in the millions especially during large runoff events, big flood events. All the ungauged or unregulated portions of the catchment that don't have reservoir or any storage shed all that water to the Gulf, and it is hundreds of thousands to millions of acre feet potentially.
And I guess the next question, lastly, is there any way to capture that water it's lost. It's gone. It's gone.
The only thing I would add to that is some years there's loss and some years we're begging for more.
Yeah.
So as a product for the BRA to be able to turn and declare it firm yield and sell it to somebody that needs to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on infrastructure to treat and move and rely on that water, that's where the issue comes. And yeah, people are looking at ways to scalp stuff off the river, and ironically, that's what Allen's Creek is. It's a scalping reservoir. But it all comes down to what these gentlemen said very early on in their presentation, and that is the Brazos is fully allocated. So to squeeze the lemon and get more out of it, it begins to beg the question, how can you use the product? And industry and municipality may not be willing to make that investment for a product that's not reliable year after year. But at times there's unbelievable amounts of water.
Director Crum has a question, and then we'll go to Tony.
Mine is more of a comment and a compliment. That was excellent. It connected so many dots for me. It's almost like looking in somebody's sock drawer to see how things really work. And so I just want to say, fascinating, outstanding, thank you, and I hope you keep doing things like that. It really is helpful for us, for the knowledge.
Okay, a couple of questions for you guys. A lot of data, great presentation. Water counting, you talked about 5 workbooks. The information that you're gathering, is that captured in the SCADA system? The first question. Number 2, how often do you have to make those entries, and why are you doing that manually? Those are 3 questions.
Okay, so some of the data is SCADA. It's our weather stations are tied into the SCADA system, and it goes into a digital readout. And so our staff, it doesn't take. They do it first thing in the morning, about 8 o'clock. And that's a good question. It would be nice to have that, automatically ingested into our system, but we're not there. We're not there yet. And so the other question. What was your other question?
Well, you answered 2 of them.
Okay.
How often are you?
Oh, so we update it every Tuesday. We update the water accounting plan every Tuesday, and then during droughts, we'll update it more frequently. And we also have to keep it available for anyone to come in and examine it during the day. So if that were the case, we would update it at that time. So, but traditionally, most of the time, it's once a week.
Yeah, I think it's important to figure out how to automate that system, cut down on human error, and obviously efficiency.
Yes,
I think we'll go a long ways.
Yes, that's a great comment, and we've worked a long way towards that. We got a little bit longer to go, but we've streamlined it, pretty, and cut down on error quite a bit from the way we're doing it now. So, but yeah, great comment.
Well, go ahead.
Well, I've seen both of you on videos that you guys have been putting out on social media and LinkedIn, and I just also wanted to compliment you on that, because most of the time when we have disputes in any organization, it's due to a lack of understanding. And so education is a product, of the BRA, and educating the board with adding this to our agendas, I think is great. And I want to compliment social media and what you guys, it's not easy to record yourself and then put that video out there, but when there's an event going on like in Asheville, North Carolina, those people, and you can go to somewhere and educate yourself without, having to call you is extremely valuable. And I just want to compliment the progress that we're making as an organization in all those areas.
Thank you for that.
So I think we can all say thank you for presentation well done. David, you and Aaron have an outstanding team, and it just goes to show how complicated water is, how important it is to educate and make sure that not only the board stays apprised as to the intricacies of water, but the community. As we move forward, we already know that water is critical in Texas. We already know that with all the economic development coming into our state, water is becoming more and more important, and informing everybody, and of course us, because we're making decisions for Texans up and down the Brazos. So thank you very much for making your presentation today. We will move on to agenda item number 2, discussion and possible action on medical insurance contract by Crystal Wilde, Human Resources Coordinator. Crystal.
I am not Crystal.
You're not Crystal.
I am going to take a minute to introduce Michelle Harris, who is our benefits administrator. Michelle, please stand up. She's been our benefits administrator for the last 8 years, and she is retiring today. And I want y'all to know that Michelle has done a phenomenal job working our benefit programs and helping with this presentation that Crystal's going to give. And she works wonderfully with all the vendors and employees on wellness initiatives and insurance and retirement, FMLA, workers' comp, you name it. And she has a great analytical mind, but yet is very empathetic with the situations that she's been dealing with. I also want to take one more second to introduce Chantel George. Chantel, could you stand up? Chantel is Michelle's replacement, and I think she's going to be a wonderful addition to our team, so I'm very excited to welcome Chantel.
Okay, let's talk about medical insurance a little bit. I'll try not to cry because I'm going to miss Michelle so much. So, all right. I know. We bring this agenda item, HR brings this agenda item each September for your consideration. Some of you might remember that the BRA has been with on a fully insured medical plan with Blue Cross Blue Shield since 2016. And we've also been working with Hub International as our broker for about that same amount of time. And I actually borrowed a few of the slides that we're going to look at today from Hub's presentation to our management team earlier this month. So our first table that we look at here is the historical loss ratio, which shows you the total loss for each year that we've been with Blue Cross Blue Shield. And as you can see, up until about 2021, we were doing exceptionally well. And then since then, our claims expense has exceeded the amount that we paid in the premiums. And of course, insurance companies like Blue Cross Blue Shield like to see that number at no more than 85% of the premiums paid, so they can cover their costs and of course make a profit. Now, going into this year, we were anticipating that we would experience around a 40% rate increase after a fourth year with over 100% loss ratio. So Hub issued a request for proposals for our plan. Here you can see that Hub reached out to 5 vendors. However, proposals were only received from Blue Cross Blue Shield of Texas and United Healthcare, and that's what we anticipated going into this. Blue Cross Blue Shield initially quoted the BRA a 21.5% premium increase for the 2025 plan year, whereas United Healthcare quoted a premium increase of about 29.3%. However, based upon Hub's discussions with United Healthcare, they were not open to negotiating their rates. Therefore, Hub did not consider the United Healthcare proposal as a viable option. Hub did successfully negotiate with Blue Cross Blue Shield, and the initial proposed increase came down to 14.1% with no changes other than the IRS requirements to minimum deductibles. Then they got it down another percent to 13% by bundling dental insurance with Blue Cross Blue Shield. Also, we're adding an HMO option with the assumption that 15% of our PPO population will migrate to the HMO plan. So the overall premiums were reduced to 12.1%. And you can see that in more detail on this chart here. So in addition to those rate negotiations that they did, Hub also negotiated a $40,000 credit on the first month's premium, and they secured a $25,000 wellness credit to be used for BRA wellness initiatives. This chart breaks down how many employees are on each tier and in each plan, in addition to the respective premiums for each plan. We have about, employees can choose whether they want to be on either the PPO plan, the high deductible health plan, also known as the HSA plan, or now we're offering the option of an HMO plan. And we have about 68% of our employee population on the PPO plan and 32% are on the HSA plan. Columns 1 and 2 on this chart show you what our current 2024 plan is. Columns 3 and 4 reflect the proposal from Blue Cross Blue Shield after Hub negotiated the rate down to 13% with the bundling of the dental insurance. And then column 5 shows you the new plan option of the HMO. And below we can see down here, I want to see if I can point. I don't know if I can point. Oh, nope, I can't point. Oh no, Lisa, help me. Sorry. So it's reduced down to 12.1%, assuming that 15% migration from the PPO plan to the HMO plan. Over the last 9 years, the BRA has only experienced a total of 35.7% increase in premiums, and that averages out to about 3.9%, while the market has averaged an 8% increase over the same time period. Okay. All right, so this is an action for item for the board to authorize the general manager to execute all contracts necessary to continue the fully insured medical plan with Blue Cross Blue Shield. Do you guys have any questions for me?
Questions? Please read the resolution.
Whereas the Brazos River Authority has maintained a relationship with Hub International since 2015 to provide benefit consulting services. Whereas the Brazos River Authority has maintained a fully insured medical plan with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Texas since January 1, 2016. Whereas Hub International issued a request for proposals for our medical plan, received 2 responses, and after analyzing both proposals, determined that it is in the best interest of the Brazos River Authority to continue the relationship with Blue Cross Blue Shield. Whereas Hub International negotiated with Blue Cross Blue Shield to reduce the initial proposed premium increase from 21.5% to 13%, which equates to approximately a $400,000 increase for the 2025 plan year. And whereas the total cost of both employer and employee medical premiums for the 2025 plan year will not exceed $4,500,000. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby authorizes the General Manager CEO to enter into all agreements necessary to continue the relationship with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Texas to provide the Brazos River Authority a fully insured medical plan at rates quoted for the 2025 plan year.
You've heard the reading of the resolution. There's a motion made by Jen Henderson and a second made by Dr. Ruiz. Please poll the board.
Presiding Officer Flores?
Yes.
Director Huber?
Yes.
Director Lloyd?
Yes.
Director Abraham?
Yes.
Director Boren?
Yes.
Director Geesey?
Yes.
Director Henderson?
Yes.
Director Crone?
Yes.
Director LaChance?
Yes.
Director Lattimore?
Yes.
Director Embro?
Yes.
Director Parks?
Yes.
Director Ruiz?
Yes.
Director Savage?
Yes.
Director Smith?
Yes.
Director Taylor?
Yes.
Director Weldon?
Yes.
Director Wilson?
Yes.
Agenda item number 3, discussion and possible action on Williamson County Regional Raw Water Line Phase 3, pumps by Brad Brunette, Central and Lower Basin Regional Manager. Brad.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
This is an action item. We're going to be requesting authorization to enter a contract with CDM Smith for engineering services associated with expansion of the Williamson County Regional Raw Water Line pumping capacity. And we have Alan Wilkie with CDM Smith here with us today, representing their firm. So just real quickly, this is a map that shows the 3 customers that we serve with this pipeline. You can see the pipeline itself running down from Lake Stillhouse Hollow down to Lake Georgetown. We serve the city of Georgetown, whose service area is that large green area, the city of Round Rock, which is the peach color, and then the Brushy Creek Municipal Utility District, which is in yellow there. These 3 customers use all the water from Lake Georgetown, and they also pay all the operations and maintenance and capital costs associated with this pipeline. So we manage and operate it on their behalf, but they're responsible for payment of everything associated with the line. Just a couple of pictures here. You saw the intake structure in Chris's slides earlier. It's an intake structure, so we use that a lot in our pictures, but it's on Lake Stillhouse Hollow there. You can see the top right picture is a picture of the inside the structure up there. We have 4 pumps in there currently. There are 2 2,500 horsepower pumps and then 2 1,250 horsepower pumps. All of this was constructed 20 to 25 years ago, so it's getting on up there in age. The structure itself was constructed first, and we've since added some pumping capacity back in around 2012, I believe. Right now, we can pump a little over 40 million gallons per day with those 4 pumps that you see that we have there. But the build-out capacity of the system is about 56 million gallons per day, and that's what we're looking at with this expansion, is to get it up to that ultimate capacity. So the contracts that we have in place with those 3 customers that I showed you a while ago require that we perform an annual 5-year inspection on the pump station and the pipeline. And so we've done several of those in the past, but this past couple of years for this effort, we did a pretty comprehensive inspection on behalf of the customers there. We've also had increasing demands. As many of you know, you've seen me up here talking about growth in that part of our basin, and some of you live down there, and so you understand the growth that we're seeing. And so we're at the point now to where we need to go ahead and expand the capacity of the pump station so that we can continue to provide a reliable supply of water to those 3 customers. And I've got a graph on the next slide that'll talk a little bit more about the timing and the demands. We selected CDM Smith a couple of years ago for this project through a request for qualifications process. And again, the first phase of work was to perform that 5-year inspection as well as preliminary engineering for the pump expansion. And so all of that's been completed now, and the major recommendations that are coming out of that effort are to replace the existing pumps with 4 new 3,000 horsepower pumps and motors, to replace about 3,100 feet of the pipeline with a higher pressure rated pipe. So when we increase the capacity of the pump station with these bigger pumps, we've got one section of line that's a little less than a mile long that we're going to need to replace because the pressure rating of the pipe won't be adequate with the expanded pumping capacity. And then lastly, we'll have a new electrical building that will handle, or that will house some new VFDs, or variable frequency drives, as well as a motor control center that will operate and run the pumps. And we're also going to be having Encore is going to have to bring in a new power line and a large new transformer to be able to provide the power that we need to run the new pump. So that's the major elements of the project that we're looking at. Here's the demand slide here. And so you can see the demands from the 3 customers at Lake Georgetown. The blue line is the actual historical water use from Lake Georgetown. And you can see that the last couple of years, 2022 and 2023, we've been up close to 50,000 acre feet per year. The red line projecting forward is what we expect the demands to be in the coming years. And then the gray line below it going forward is the demand projection if we're in, drought conditions and we have to implement our drought contingency plan where we ask our customers to reduce their demand. So right now, I don't have a line on here, but if you look at the left axis, the demand numbers there, right now we can reliably supply a little under 60,000 acre feet per year from Lake Georgetown, with Lake Georgetown itself and the pipeline and pumping capacity that we have in place today. So when you look at 60,000 acre feet per year over to the right, you can see it intersects that red line around 2026, and then the gray line out closer to 2030. And so that's the window of time that we're looking at needing to get the expansion done. If we have wet weather, rainy conditions, and we've got a lot of inflow into Lake Georgetown, we might be able to make it, 5 or 10 years longer without having this. But if we have drought conditions, that's what we've got to plan for. And so that's why we need to get it done here pretty quickly. And then the last thing I'd point out here is you'll see out in 2030, the demand lines kind of turn and go flat. And so that's the point at which the customers that we have will be using all of the water under contract. So once they get up to that point, there's no more contract water. And so they'll just continue using that amount. And this 56 MGD expansion that we're talking about will get our total ability up to supply close to 75,000 acre feet per year. So that's what the goal is here. So the professional services agreement with CDM Smith that we've been negotiating will include all the engineering design phase work, the bid phase work, as well as construction phase services. So you can see the total for the design effort and all the other associated work that goes with that is about $6.3 million. And so it'll be the typical 30, 60, 95, 100% design, plus that list of things that you see there in italics below. As a lot of that is actually required for the design, or modeling and different types of things that aren't necessarily standard with every project. Then If you look further down the table, the total for construction contract administration and engineering is 2.2 million. And so that would occur once we select a contractor a couple of years from now and actually start constructing the project. The CDM will still be performing the administration services for us for that contract and reviewing all the submittals and those types of things. And then the last thing you see is the total for the resident project representative services of 2.2 million. That will be for having an engineer out there on site when the project's being constructed, making sure that the contractor is building things according to the specifications and that we're getting what we're paying for. So we're looking at a total contract value with CDM for about 10.7 million. I've got a resolution on the next slide for you to consider, and on that you'll see that we've rounded it up to 11 million to provide. It's about 3% contingency in the event we have unforeseen circumstances arise over the next 3 or 4 years while we get this project executed. So I'll stop there and answer any questions that you may have.
Director Embro and then Director Henderson.
What's the opinion of probable construction costs for this project?
It's a little south of 50 million.
Director Henderson.
Obviously, we'll be refining that as we go through design, but the preliminary engineering report, it was slightly under 50 million.
I noticed that you're adding an electrical building. Didn't see anything in here for backup power generators or anything of that nature.
Yeah, since this is a raw water transfer station, we've looked at backup power before, but we operate this station to move raw water, so it's not needed on a day-to-day basis. And so, we could go weeks, even months without actually having the system running, unlike a water treatment plant where you've got to have treated water every day. So to date, we've looked at that. We haven't come to the point where we thought it was worth the investment. The customers are involved in those discussions as well. We actually built some downtime into our modeling too, so that if we have pumps down, we've got downtime built into the modeling where we look at the reliable supply. So not to say we couldn't decide to put some redundant power in there in the future, but we've not gone there at this point because it's not as time sensitive as a treated water supply.
Thanks.
Jen.
So one of the questions I have is, will this, as a result of this project, will we be able to allocate more capacity to those three entities in any way once it's completed?
No. So the contracts are already in place, assuming that we will build this capacity when the time is there. So it will just allow them to continue growing into their existing contracts. And again, if you go back here, the total contracts that we have for these customers between Lake Georgetown and the supply from Stillhouse is a little under 75,000 acre-feet per year. So it's going to merge with that red line out there when we get to 2030-ish.
Furthermore, this is not a system asset. So when Georgetown, Round Rock, and Jonah or Brushy contracted for this water, they knew that they would financially have to pay to move that water 20 years ago when they bought it. So the rest of the system is not subsidizing this effort.
That was going to be my next question. Okay. So what is the timeline associated with this scope of work?
I think it's about a year for design once we issue notice to proceed to CDM. So we'll be looking at most of FY 2025 for the design. Then we'll be bidding and constructing in 2026 and 2027. So I think we're looking at probably 3 years to get it built.
So I think you said 1 year of design, 2 years of construction. What is it that's going to take 2 years to construct? I'm not really connecting those dots yet. Okay.
Yeah, and we're also going to have to do some reinforcements on the structure itself. We've got Encore is going to have to bring new power lines in and a new transformer, and so that's kind of we're going to have to work around that. That's going to be work that they're doing, not us, and they're actually paying for that. So we've been successful, at least so far, in negotiating that with Encore. So it may not take 2 years. I hope we can get it done quicker, but we've got a little time built in there, if we need it.
I do think time is of the essence on this. I don't think we could do it fast enough. If we said it was going to be here tomorrow, they'd want it today. And so anything we can do to speed that up, I think it'd be welcome.
Yeah, absolutely.
But thank you.
Director Lattimore.
Brad, maybe
maybe I missed this somewhere along the way, but the cities, our customers have agreed to reimburse us
Yes.
for this. At what point are they committed to, I mean, we're essentially spending their money. At what point do they approve this? Have they already done so?
Yeah, yes and no. They've approved the 2025 budget, and we've got money built into the 2025 budget for this. I think we have $5 million in there. We also meet with them every year to go through the budget to look at when we're going to need to issue debt, because we're ultimately going to have to issue debt for this project, and they're going to be responsible for paying that debt. And so we meet with them annually on budget stuff, but we had a workshop with them about 2 months ago on these recommendations and the direction that we're going. And we'll be following up with them as we get the contract in place with CD and Smith to do that.
I'm not sure my question was clear. If we approve this expenditure today, what obligation do our customer cities have to reimburse the VRA?
Our contracts with them that are in place today require them to do that.
Okay, that answers the question. Thank you.
Director Taylor.
Brad, I'm not familiar with the engineering firm. Do you have a good amount of experience with them, or is this a new firm to you, or what?
With CDM?
Yeah.
No, yeah, they've done a lot of work for BRA. They're actually doing a lot of our work out at the East Williamson County Water Plant. So we've had really good luck with them. And Alan, I've known Alan since I've probably been at BRA since 1997, and he's helped us with a lot of projects in the past, and we've got a lot of faith in them and a lot of respect for what they do.
Thank you very much.
Good enough for me.
Director Giese.
So really, this expenditure is just so the pump staying so old. You just want to replace them before they'll start having hiccups. And
We're adding capacity, but we looked at part of this preliminary engineering study. We looked at 5 different options. So we looked at, do we replace all the pumps? Should we just put in 2 new bigger pumps? We even looked at putting a booster pump station along the pipeline. We looked at those different options, and we looked at cost benefit and life cycle costs, including power costs. And given the age and condition of the existing pumps and the requirements to get that 56 million gallons per day, the 4 new pumps were kind of rose to the top as a recommended option. So it's a little bit of both. We're going to be replacing what we have out there with new pumps, plus we're going to be adding capacity to get us another 14 MGD.
and the fact that the customers are reimbursing, that's a good thing.
Right.
Director Embro.
You guys have a rule of thumb for consultant's fee relative to the construction cost?
I think there is a rule of thumb. Mike, I don't know if you've got a number in the top of your head, but but before Blake gets up here, I'll give you one of the things that we look at, even with the rule of thumb, is when we go out for bids on this, we don't know what those bids are going to be. I can go back to the Lake Limestone Tannergate project, and we got 4 bids, and the winning bid on that was 17 million, and the next closest bid was 24 million. So if the 17 million guy wouldn't have bid, then it changes the math. So a lot of it depends on what that cost ultimately is, but we do have some rules of thumb, and we do look at the fees relative to
That's
that
what I
when
want
we're
you to talk
evaluating.
about. Talk about the process, Blake.
Okay, so looking, if I understood the question correctly, Doctor.
I'll take doctor. That's
I'm sorry, Director Embro. So how we evaluate fees associated with projects. So we look at it from a few different standpoints. One, we kind of compare level of effort versus the overall fee. What are we looking at doing? We compare their fee versus what we receive on other projects as far as hourly rates, stuff like that. So we look at it from a number of different standpoints to try to get a feel for what are we doing on that project, what makes sense from a level of effort, what makes sense from a fee associated with that level of effort. Is that?
Yes, that's
what
good.
you're looking for?
Thank you.
So basically, you're like a issue to RFQ. You just wanted the qualifications, then you negotiated with contractor at risk, and you came up with these variables that you just mentioned, the process as you go through. You bypass the RFP to deal with the RFQ and get the qualifications and get it going fast, which I like. I like that aspect of it, but is that the process I understand you're talking about?
So we have kind of, I guess, there's some statutory requirements on how we go about professional services. when we're looking at professional services, we issue the RFQ or RFP, understanding what those qualifications are. Once we make a selection based on those qualifications on that proposal, we enter into scope and fee negotiations. We're required to negotiate scope first, so we have to completely nail down scope before we can go into negotiating fee. Is that?
Yeah, I get it now. Thank you.
All right, very good.
Thanks, Brad.
Brad, I believe we have a resolution to be read.
Be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby authorizes the General Manager, CEO, to negotiate and execute a professional services agreement with CDM Smith Incorporated for all activities associated with the permitting, engineering, design, bidding, construction phase engineering, and resident project representative services for expansion of pumping capacity to approximately 56 million gallons per day at the Williamson County Regional Raw Water Line intake structure on Lake Stillhouse Hollow, and associated improvements to the pipeline and appurtenances in an amount not to exceed $11 million.
You've heard the reading of the resolution. A motion was made by Director Wilson, a second by Director LaChance. Please poll the board.
Presiding Officer Flores?
Yes.
Director Huber?
Yes.
Director Lloyd?
Yes.
Director Abraham?
Yes.
Director Boren?
Yes.
Director Geesey?
Yes.
Director Henderson?
Yes.
Director Crone?
Yes.
Director LaChance?
Yes.
Director Lattimore?
Yes.
Director Embro?
Abstain.
Director Parks? Director Ruiz?
Yes.
Director Savage?
Yes.
Director Smith?
Yes.
Director Taylor?
Yes.
Director Weldon?
Yes.
Director Wilson?
Yes.
Agenda item number 4, discussion and possible action on copper ion generator project by Brad Burnett, Central and Lower Basin Regional Manager.
So again, this is another action item. We're requesting a budget amendment to put some money in the 2025 budget to complete the copper ion generator project at the same pump station we were just talking about at Stillhouse Hollow. And if you're feeling a little bit like you're watching the movie Groundhog Day, that we already do this, there's a good reason for that, because we did at the July meeting. If you think back, we did a budget amendment for this project at that meeting to move some money from 23 into 24. We got into 24 when we were budgeting. We thought we were going to be complete, and so we didn't put any in 2025. But as it's turned out, we're looking at probably the end of October to get this project finished up. We've got not a whole lot to do, but probably another month's worth of effort. So that's why we're coming to you today, is just to put some money in the 2025 budget for the project. And again, for those of you that may not have been here or may not remember, I've got some pictures here. And I also actually have my pictures this time. Last time, you may remember, I said I had some pictures and they weren't up there. So I got a do-over here. You can actually see the little building up there that houses the copper ion generator. Picture on the bottom left is an actual picture of the copper ion generator itself within the building. And then there's piping that takes the copper solution from that building out across the bridge to the intake structure, where it gets injected under the water at the intake screens. And so basically, we put solid copper rods into that copper ion generator. It turns that into a liquid solution. The zebra mussels don't like that environment, and it's, we inject it at the screens to protect the system there. So in terms of the total project cost here, nothing has changed on that. The contract with the contractor is still what it is. We're not raising the cost or anything like that. There's just money that we thought we were going to spend in 2024 that we didn't get spent. And so now we need to put it into 2025. And so we've got a $500,000 budget amendment, which should be more than enough to cover getting the project completed. So I've got a resolution here on this one as well. So I'll stop and answer any questions if you have any.
Any questions for Brad? All right, please read the resolution.
Be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby authorizes and approves an amendment to increase the fiscal year 2025 Williamson County Regional Raw Water Line Copper Ion Generator Project budget and corresponding customer contributions by $500,000 from $0 to $500,000 to cover timing differences in project delivery.
You've heard the reading of the resolution. A motion was made by Director Henderson, a second by Director Crone. Please poll the board.
Presiding Officer Flores?
Yes.
Director Huber,
Yes.
Director Lloyd,
Yes.
Director Abraham,
Yes.
Director Boren,
Yes.
Director Geesey,
Yes.
Director Henderson,
Yes.
Director Crone,
Yes.
Director LaChance,
Yes.
Director Lattimore,
Yes.
Director Embro,
Yes.
Director Parks,
Yes.
Director Ruiz,
Yes.
Director Savage,
Yes.
Director Smith,
Yes.
Director Taylor,
Yes.
Director Weldon,
Yes.
Director Wilson.
Yes.
Michelle, before you start, we're going to take a quick pause. We'll come back at 11:30. Thank you. (11:30 a.m.) The board will now reconvene into session. Agenda item number 5, report and possible discussion on report of external audit plan 2024 by Michelle Giroir, Chief Financial Officer. Michelle.
Thank you, Presiding Officer Flores. Like I said, this is a report item. This is some required communication that's required by generally accepted accounting principles from our external auditor from Baker Tilly. And so this was actually presented to the Admin and Audit Committee earlier this morning. They had some wonderful questions, and now we're going to make this presentation to you all. And so I'm going to introduce Aaron Worthman. He's the audit principal from our external auditor, Baker Tilly.
Good morning. Once again, I'm Aaron Worthman, the lead audit principal with Baker Tilly, and I'm pleased to present the fiscal year 2024 financial audit plan. So what I want to do first is just introduce our engagement team, then want to go through the scope, what is it as part of the audit, walk through our audit timeline, go through some required communications, touch on some areas of emphasis, and then touch on our audit plan. So again, this audit team is consistent with prior years. We've been able to keep continuity with staffing. So we still have myself as the lead audit partner. We have Sarah Slaughter here, who's the director on the audit. And then we continue to have Ryan Tyler, who's our audit manager. What I want to do is just start by defining our deliverables. So the first deliverable we have is our actual audit, or our audit opinion of your financial statements. The second deliverable we have is our report on internal control over financial reporting and on compliance and other matters based on our audit. And then there's always a potential for a third deliverable, which is our single audit. If your entity receives more than $750,000 of federal funding in any fiscal year, we would be required to conduct a single audit on your federal and state awards. And my understanding is for this year, I don't think that will be applicable. Just walking through the audit timeline here, it truly is a year-round audit process. So our audit team started planning in June of 2024. We then conducted our preliminary audit fieldwork in July, obviously presenting now our audit plan in September. We're going to be conducting our final fieldwork in October and November, and then with draft reports due in December, and then I'll be back in January to present our final audit results. A couple things I wanted to touch on relative to our required communication. One thing is I'd mentioned that we provide an opinion on your financial statements, and we'll be talking quite a bit about internal control going forward. But I did want to note, even though we test internal controls, we do not express an opinion on the effectiveness of those controls. Other item I want to touch on is materiality. So we use materiality really as the foundation of our audit. It sets our audit samples, it sets our audit testing. So when we look at materiality, we look at not only qualitative, but also quantitative materiality. And I often get asked, when it comes to materiality, what is that definition or what does that mean? And it means there have to be an error in your financial statements great enough that it would change the decisions of the users of those financial statements. So you can tell that to change the users or to change the decisions of those users has to be a pretty significant amount. So we determine what that amount is. We'll look at qualitative factors, and we set all of our testing accordingly. I do want to note that we work for you. as the governing body, but we do communicate with management throughout this audit process. We work directly with management in this audit process, but we do work for the governing body. A couple other items that are outlined in the engagement letter, which has been signed, is management and the governing body has the responsibility for the appropriateness and quality of your accounting policies and practices, and we're engaged to test those then and form an opinion at the end of the audit. A couple other items, every year I talk about auditor independence. We need to, and every individual on our audit team needs to be independent in fact, in appearance with your organization, which we are. In addition to that, we do use a couple specialists as part of our audit. We use a specialist called Harvest, which we use to independently confirm the fair value of your investments. And in addition to that, we have a Baker Tilly individual who's a certified information systems auditor that conducts the testing of our information technology controls. So they act as part of our audit team to do that. In any audit that we have, there's always one risk we always have, significant risk, and that would be the management override of controls. So what we do relative to that risk is we take a look at the journal entries that management makes during the year. In addition to that, we also conduct fraud risk interviews, which I'll touch on in a moment. And then lastly, the other risk we have is improper revenue recognition. What we'll do there is we test revenue cutoff, we'll look at your billing and revenues, but that again is normally a standard risk that we have as part of the audit process. Now, one of the items I wanted to talk about, and one of the reasons we're here, is to talk about this, this two-way audit communication. So what we need to do is, in addition to us presenting our audit results and presenting our audit plan, we're required to reach out to you to get your thoughts on fraud risks, or any areas of concern that you have as part of our audit process. Was able to meet with the audit committee earlier and discuss this to some extent, but just note, if anytime any of you have an issue or a concern or an area that you think we should take a closer look at, I'd ask that you reach out to me to have those conversations, before we start our audit process. Areas of audit emphasis, just to look very high level here. If you were to break down our audit, I'd say roughly 30% of what we do is specific to internal controls and testing those internal controls, and most of which is going to center around your information technology. But that's 30%. 40% of what we do is what we call our substantive tests. That would be the nuts and bolts of our audit. That would be, confirming your cash and investments, taking a look at your fixed asset additions, tying those to source documents, things like that. And then the remaining 30% has to do with the planning of our audit and financial reporting. I put this slide in here in case we were to have a single audit. It goes through some of the testing that we would perform there, but again, we will not be conducting a single audit as part of this year's audit engagement. Then lastly, what I want to do is kind of touch on the areas of emphasis in our audit plan. So we start with our preliminary and planning fieldwork. That's where we establish this materiality level that I talked about before. We'll look at internal controls. We review the board minutes to see, what major transactions did you have this year that we should incorporate into our audit plan. We then have our final fieldwork. That's where most of our work is done. That would be testing your cash and investments, your fixed assets, taking a look at expenditures, your payroll, compliance with laws and regulations, taking a look at your financial statements. And then lastly, we wrap up with our audit completion. Again, we review your draft financials. We obtain your attorney's responses. So what your attorneys will do is they'll let us know if there's any ongoing litigation that we need to be aware of as part of our audit process. We'll look at management's evaluation of subsequent events. So we're actually responsible for reporting any material subsequent events from your fiscal year end through when we issue our audit report. So we'll take a look at that. We also obtain a management representation letter, which you will get a copy of. What that does is it outlines management's representations as part of the audit. It includes their thoughts on fraud risks, internal controls, accounting policies and procedures, things to that extent. And with that, I will open up to any questions anyone might have.
Any questions for Aaron? Like he mentioned earlier, the Admin and Audit Committee met this morning, and I think he addressed everything that we talked about. Anybody have any questions? All right, Aaron, thank you. Thanks for being here. Moving on to agenda item number 6, discussion and possible action on surplus personal property by Michelle Giroux, Chief Financial Officer. Michelle.
Bring that back down. Okay, good morning. This is in accordance with our enabling legislation. Whenever we want to surplus or auction off fixed assets, we have to bring it to the board for your approval first. This is the first time we've brought you surplus since March, so it's been a little while. And you may notice this list is all vehicles. It's 22 vehicles. So what we're trying to do is go ahead and surplus all the vehicles that were replaced during fiscal year 24. I'm also sort of bringing in advance all the vehicles that we have scheduled to replace in 2025. We're going to go ahead and put those up and have you declare those surplus, with the ultimate goal being I will only bring you vehicles once a year in September. And then after this, it should... everybody's favorite subject. But no, to bring you vehicles only in September, and then it would only be 8 or 9. So there's a resolution to read, and it includes the list of all the vehicles. Does anyone have any questions before we read the resolution? No questions. All right. Thank you.
Be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby authorizes the General Manager, CEO, to dispose of the following surplus personal property under the terms and conditions that are in the best interest of the Brazos River Authority. Be it further resolved that the Board of Directors authorizes the General Manager, CEO, to continue to use and/or maintain previously authorized surplus property in a manner that it is in the best interest of the Brazos River Authority until appropriate replacement property is received and placed in service. Items no longer needed or repairs not cost efficient. Quantity 1, 2008 Ford F-150 with crane, ID number 0201. Quantity 1, 2008 Ford Expedition 4x4, ID number 0423. Quantity 1, 2013 Ford F-150, ID number 2678. Quantity 1, 2010 Chevy Silverado, ID number 2822. Quantity 1, 2012 Chevy Silverado, ID number 7192. Quantity 1, 2008 Ford F-150, ID number 7488. Quantity 1, 2015 Chevy 1500, ID number 8310. Quantity 1, 2008 Ford F-450, ID number 9526. Quantity 1, 2012 Chevy Silverado, ID number 0107. Quantity 1, 2000 Ford F-750, ID number 3166. Quantity 1, 2016 Chevy Silverado 2500, ID number 5589. Quantity 1, 2010 Ford F-350, ID number 5654. Quantity 1, 2012 Ford F-250, ID number 8585. Quantity 1, 2015 Chevy Equinox, ID number 3059. Quantity 1, 2017 Chevy Silverado, ID number 0214. Quantity 1, 2018 Chevy Double Cab, ID number 1406. Quantity 1, 2007 Freightliner Haul Truck, ID number 5403. Quantity 1, 2019 Chevy Silverado, ID number 7091. Quantity 1, 2013 Chevy Silverado, ID number 8204. Quantity 1, 2013 Ford F-150, ID number 9489. Quantity 1, 2015 Ford F-450, ID number 6285. Quantity 1, 2009 Ford F-250, ID number 2377.
You've heard the reading of the resolution. Director Huber has made a motion, and Director Wilson has seconded. Please pull the board.
Presiding Officer Flores?
Yes.
Director Huber?
Yes.
Director Lloyd?
Yes.
Director Abraham?
Yes.
Director Boren?
Yes.
Director Giese?
Yes.
Director Henderson?
Yes.
Director Crone?
Yes.
Director LaChance,
Yes.
Director Lattimore,
Yes.
Director Embro,
Yes.
Director Parks,
Yes.
Director Ruiz,
Yes.
Director Savage,
Yes.
Director Smith,
Yes.
Director Taylor,
Yes.
Director Weldon,
Yes.
Director Wilson.
Yes.
Agenda item number 7, discussion and possible action on Valley View Investment Advisor Contract Renewal by Michelle Gerard, Chief Financial Officer.
Thank you. This is an action item. Our Public Funds Investment Act requires us to hire an investment advisor for an initial period of only 2 years and then two-year extensions. So this is going to be the second 2-year extension for Valley View. We initially signed a contract with them in October of 2020. When this extension expires in 2026, we'll do the RFP process. But we've been very happy with Valley View, and so this is just to approve the extension to keep them for another 2 years.
For Michelle.
After the 2 years, will Valley View be eligible to respond to the RFQ?
Yes, they will.
Any other questions? All right, please read the resolution.
Be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby authorizes the renewal of the contract for investment advisory services with Valley View Consulting LLC for 2 additional years ending November 12, 2026.
You've heard the reading of the resolution. A motion was made by Director Henderson and a second by Director Cron. Please poll the board.
Presiding Officer Flores,
Yes.
Director Huber,
Yes.
Director Lloyd,
Yes.
Director Abraham,
Yes.
Director Boren,
Yes.
Director Geesey,
Yes.
Director Henderson,
Yes.
Director Crone,
Yes.
Director LaChance,
Yes.
Director Lattimore,
Yes.
Director Embro,
Yes.
Director Parks,
Yes.
Director Ruiz,
Yes.
Director Savage,
Yes.
Director Smith,
Yes.
Director Taylor,
Yep.
Director Weldon,
Yes.
Director Wilson.
Yes.
Agenda item number 8, discussion and possible action on Willits LLC Master Intergovernmental Cooperative Purchasing Agreement by Michelle Gerard, Chief Financial Officer.
This item is to allow us to enter into an intergovernmental cooperative agreement with Equalis. This will allow us to continue utilizing Hub International as our health insurance advisor. And if you heard from Crystal's presentation earlier, these are the guys that helped us get from an initial 21% increase with Blue Cross Blue Shield down to 13%. So we are very eager to continue utilizing the services of Hub. There's no cost to us to join this purchasing cooperative. It will also give us access to other pre-negotiated vendor contracts with some folks that we already use, such as Granger for industrial products, Hahn for office furnishing, Xerox. And so we recommend allowing BRA to join this purchasing co-op. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Michelle? Seeing no questions, please read the resolution.
Be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby authorizes the General Manager, CEO, to execute a Master Intergovernmental Cooperative Purchasing Agreement with Equalis Group, LLC.
You've heard the reading of the resolution. Is there a motion to adopt? Director Taylor has made a motion, a second by Director Wilson. Please poll the board.
Presiding Officer Flores,
Yes.
Director Huber,
Yes.
Director Lloyd,
Yes.
Director Abraham,
Yes.
Director Boren,
Yes.
Director Geesey,
Yes.
Director Henderson,
Yes.
Director Crone,
Yes.
Director LaChance,
Yes.
Director Lattimore,
Yes.
Director Embro,
Yes.
Director Parks,
Yes.
Director Ruiz,
Yes.
Director Savage,
Yes.
Director Smith,
Yes.
Director Taylor,
Yes.
Director Weldon,
Yes.
Director Wilson.
Yes.
Agenda item number 9, discussion and possible action, application for an extension of time to commence complete construction of Allen's Creek Reservoir by Destiny Rush Huber, Staff Council.
Thanks. It's a mouthful, sorry. So essentially, we need to file an application with TCEQ to extend the deadline to begin and complete construction on Allen's Creek Reservoir by 10 years. This is a mandate in our permit. The current deadline is September 1st, 2025. So just a little timeline on our current permit. The initial permit was surrendered by the Houston Lighting and Power Company in 1984. In 1999, the Texas legislature passed SB 1593, recommending Allen's Creek as a water supply project, and directed the Texas Water Development Board to reissue the permit. BRA, with the City of Houston, with Texas Water Development Board financing, obtained the permit, and that is when an initial deadline to commence and complete construction was originally entered for September 1st, 2018. In 2011, we extended that time and deadline to where it is currently September 1st, 2025. And now we have to extend it again. So this is the statute. Basically, TCEQ can extend the deadline for a reasonable period of time, and failure to adhere to the timeline embedded within the permit could result in forfeiture of the permit. And obviously, we don't want that. So TCEQ recommended we file this extension at least 1 year out from the deadline. And if we have incurred reasonable delays, this can include litigation, settlement agreements, and other delays beyond the permittee's control. So the current deadline right now, September 1st, 2025, we would be requesting an extension to commence Allen's Creek by September 1st, 2035, and to complete construction from 2030 to 2040. This is just largely due to the vast amount of time it takes to obtain federal permitting. So we've already submitted a preliminary draft with TCEQ, and we received no concerns. So I have a resolution here unless anybody has any questions.
It's warning on this creek. Is it the irregular stuff you go through?
Yeah, it's a 404.
Okay.
It's not a nationwide.
Okay. Thank you.
So it'll be a 10-year process. And we knew when we went with the legislation to move this forward that this was going to happen.
So when it's 404, you can't speed that up. It's pretty much.
It's the course process.
Okay.
Yep.
Director Wilson has a question.
And it is reasonable for us to expect that TCEQ will extend the deadline?
They have said that this is just an administrative process and they have no concerns.
All right, seeing no other questions, please read the resolution.
Whereas the Allen's Creek Water Use Permit contains an existing deadline for initiating construction on or before September 1, 2025, and completing construction on or before September 1, 2030, which is inconsistent with the anticipated project timeframe. Whereas under Texas Water Code 11.145, BRA may request authorization from TCEQ for an extension of the existing deadlines to commence and complete construction of Allen's Creek Reservoir. Whereas the BRA desires to request an extension of time to initiate construction on or before September 1, 2035, and complete construction on or before September 1, 2040, and whereas authorization is requested for the General Manager CEO on behalf of BRA to facilitate the execution of and pursue an application for an extension of the existing deadlines for commencement and completion of construction on the Allen's Creek Reservoir. Be it resolved that the Board of Directors hereby authorizes and directs the General Manager CEO to execute and facilitate the pursuit of an application for an extension of the existing deadlines for commencement and completion of construction on the Allen's Creek Reservoir.
You've heard the reading of the resolution. Motion was made by Director Savage, a second by Director Wilson. Please poll the board.
Presiding Officer Flores?
Yes.
Director Huber?
Yes.
Director Lloyd?
Yes.
Director Abraham?
Yes.
Director Boren?
Yes.
Director Giese?
Yes.
Director Henderson?
Yes.
Director Crone?
Yes.
Director LaChance?
Yes.
Director Lattimore?
Yes.
Director Ambrose,
Yes.
Director Parks,
Yes.
Director Ruiz.
Yes.
Director Savage,
Yes.
Director Smith,
Yes.
Director Taylor,
Yes.
Director Weldon,
Yes.
Director Wilson.
Yes.
Agenda item number 10, report and possible discussion from Chevron and Natural Resource Defense Council, NRDC, by Destiny Rosh-Huber, Staff Council.
So earlier today, you heard from new people that you haven't seen before, Chris and Peyton and Crystal. Now you're going to hear from Destiny. She is an up-and-coming rock star in our legal department. Many of you reached out to me months ago to ask me what were the implications of this case. And I responded that we're diving in and digging in, and I've given Destiny 15 to 20 minutes to talk with you about what it means to us and the implications, and I think you'll be impressed with her presentation.
Okay, so like David said, I'm going to give you a background about the case, what it was and why it got overturned, and then some of the short and long-term kind of projections of what people think might happen. So Chevron v. NRDC is a landmark administrative law decision by the United States Supreme Court. It set forth the test known as Chevron deference, so you'll probably hear it referred to as Chevron deference or Chevron. And it's basically for when federal courts must defer to the agency's interpretation of a law or statute. Landmark is not an understatement. It's been cited by 17,000 lower federal court decisions and over 70 Supreme Court decisions. And the essential test is this. In a dispute between an agency, federal, interpretation of a statute, and a third party, federal courts were required to give deference to the agency's interpretation if such interpretation was reasonable. That's a lot of legal speak. So here's a little bit more of an easier example to understand. So in baseball, there's kind of an unofficial myth. It is the tie goes to the runner. And the idea is that a forced runner, usually the batter runner, who arrives on base at the same time as the ball is safe. Now, in practicality, we know that's not what happens. We have a first base umpire who will decide, whether or not they thought the ball got there first or they thought the batter got there first. This is essentially what Chevron didn't require. So they didn't have an umpire. They said, if it's between the agency and a third party, agency wins. In a post-Chevron world, now that it's overturned, we're going to have judges acting more like our umpires who will make the determination on the interpretation of the statute without solely relying on deference. So that's the general idea. Yeah, here's a little bit of a historical timeline on Chevron. So pre-1940s, the federal courts utilized a 10-factor consideration test, so they just didn't defer to agency interpretations at all. Then we had Skidmore v. Swift Co. Sorry, that's a mouthful. Here, the Supreme Court developed a 4-part test for when they could defer to the agency's opinion. So it depended on how thorough the agency's actions were, the validity of the agency's reasoning, consistency with other interpretations over time, and other general persuasive powers. In 1984, the Supreme Court stepped in and developed a 2-step process for when courts must defer to agency interpretation of a statute they administer. That's the Chevron test. So here's the 2-step test. There's an unofficial step 0, which basically says that the agency must be administering the statute. The whole idea behind Chevron is that these agencies have expertise, so they don't get to just defer to them on whatever they're thinking. If you're thinking EPA, it's going to be environmental regulations. They're not going to defer to their opinion on healthcare. So then step 1 is, has Congress spoken directly on the precise issue at hand? It's all about ambiguity. If Congress's intent was clear, there was no room for the agency's interpretation, so they don't get deference. In case law, clarity is basically how long does it take you to find what you think Congress meant, and when you find it, how confident are you in what you think they're saying. So if you get to that point, there's ambiguity, we're not sure what Congress meant, then you move to step 2. And that is the agency's interpretation. Is it reasonable or not? Reasonableness was based on the specific fact set of circumstances, so it was a case-by-case evaluation. But overwhelmingly, if the courts made it to step 2, they found that the agency's interpretation was reasonable. So why do people want it removed? What ended up happening with Chevron was that it essentially became a political tool to advancing policy issues. What you would have is 2 really reasonable opinions, and the courts would start deferring to the agency's opinion, which may or may not have been based on policy. So in the initial case itself, the defining question was, what is a statutory source? So here it was under the Clean Air Act. You had a factory, and the agencies wanted to, I'm trying to just not get the tax messed up. The agencies wanted to tax based on the very specific pipe, so each of those three, whereas Chevron wanted the whole factory to count as one. This idea is that they could admit potentially more or less from different pipes, but if they were being charged based on the individual ones, obviously that cost was going to be higher. So both interpretations was reasonable, but the agency felt that by actually taxing the individual pipes, we were achieving the overall policy goals of the Clear Air Act. So here's a case that overturned it, Loper Bright Enterprises v. Romano. It was put together with another case, Relentless v. Department of Commerce. Both had very small trade associations who were subjected to statutes that they did not think were reasonable interpretations. And in the end, the court ended up determining that Chevron deference test conflicts with the Administrative Procedures Act. The APA is basically the rule book for agencies. It's very, very short. But it basically tells them what they can and can't do and how they make their rules. So the Supreme Court essentially said that because the APA did not specifically allow for agency deference, that Chevron, which gave agency deference, was a violation of that act. So that's kind of the general consensus. Now, this is a perspective holding, which means that none of the other cases that I referenced are overturned. But the dissent relied pretty heavily on the fact that that some of those cases basically spent a long time fine-tuning Chevron, and that this removal of Chevron was unnecessary because it was fine-tuned. Additionally, the dissent was concerned because Congress does not write perfectly incomplete laws, and sometimes that's intentional. So that's kind of both sides of what's going on, where we're at. Now the good stuff. Okay, so these are kind of the short and long-term implications. We can't say for certain what's going to happen. We don't know. This is kind of the 6 things that we think may or may not happen. Ideally, overturning Chevron would make it so that judges get to decide, and in the long run, there's more consistency in the determinations. We're not just relying on whatever the agency feels at the time. So, some things we think might happen. Agency caution. Agencies are likely to proceed with greater caution in their rulemaking. This may lead to less formal rulemaking. They may issue more guidances, but we don't know. They're going to proceed with greater caution in their statutory interpretations as well as their enforcement. Applicants will need to develop stronger records for contentious issues, which may delay projects or take certain alternatives off the table. Again, we don't know. It may be just based on how proactive the applicant is. And then agencies will need clearer authority to modify programs. This applies to us a little less. This is a thing that most people are concerned with the USDA. So there is some uncertainty in judicial scrutiny. I know we've all had an umpire make a call that we hated, so we just don't know what they're going to do. And this could lead to more costly and complex litigation on federal projects, but the overall long-term goal is to create uniformity and reduce uncertainty in agency decision. We're going to see some testing of agency authority. This is already happening, and this is just partially the sign of the times. We're going to see more lawsuits testing agency power of long-standing agency action. So for us, that's going to be NEPA, the Clean Water Act, and the Environmental Species Act. There were some other Supreme Court cases that came out at the same time that does affect this. I don't have time today to go into these, but we are monitoring those as well. Okay, some else. Let's see. We may see some uncertainty in regulatory compliance. The agencies may be less willing to put out certain things, or they may reassess what they're already doing. Again, we're not quite sure. What we could see is increased forum shopping at the judicial level. So this is groups looking for more favorable judges and to move projects along and moving their court cases into certain courts and out of certain courts, looking for favorable options. But we see this a lot. We could also see some continuous changes to the regulatory landscape. So projects are going to experience delays in the permitting process, project timelines, and this is just so agencies can kind of firm up their records. Let's see. Oh, and it could take a little bit longer as judges' opinions come down. So what about Texas? I know you're all thinking it. So Chevron was a federal case in federal law. It applied to federal agencies, But most states do have their own version of Chevron. For Texas, that's the Texas Citizens case. And it was found in 2011 and established very similar factors to Chevron, but they have a little bit longer of a test. So it's a 6-part test. And really the heart of the Texas test is ambiguity. Is there really a discrepancy in the plain language, whereas the federal version had much more to do with reasonableness? Was the agency right in the direction that they went? And likely at this point, Citizens will not be overturned. It's found in case law, not the APA. It's not the same thing. But I just want to make that clear for y'all. So some general takeaways. The sky is not falling on our projects. Don't worry. But the overturning of Chevron will create a degree of uncertainty for federal regulations and projects as we see people start to test the bounds of this new agency and judiciary authority. We're likely to see some more cases that revise or roll back long-established case law and expect big changes in the administrative law sphere. But I think what's best for BRA right now is to be more proactive than ever when it comes to our federal project. So this is investing more in establishing a strong record, maybe by hiring consultants or having heavily entrenched legal support. That's a little job security for me though, so take that what you will. Preparing for costly and contentious legal battles, reviewing statutory sources early for our federal projects to help determine, where we stand, and becoming potentially more involved in federal legislation. So I don't have anything for y'all. Sorry, Lisa, I won't jump too far ahead. But I can take questions if y'all have it.
So PFAS is a big one, that to me seems very ambiguous, at least at this point. And do you see, or are you aware of cases that are already been filed that might delay or push out, any compliance that we would have to begin doing for PFAS?
Yeah, so the PFAS issue is a little bit nuanced just because what's pushing PFAS is those 2 larger settlements already. And we're seeing just more big class action settlements come out of it. As for the new regulations that the EPA is pushing down, we're already testing in that way. And so I think it's following that agency guidance and seeing what they're doing, but we're not seeing anything else in particular.
Director Boren?
Can we squeeze it faster?
Well, maybe, hopefully, but we're not quite sure at this time.
Any other questions for Destiny? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Our next agenda item is an executive session. The Board of Directors will conduct a closed meeting and executive session on the following matters. A, pursuant to the authority granted by Section 551.076 of the Texas Open Meetings Act to deliberate 1, the deployment or specific occasions for implementation of security personnel or devices, or 2, a security audit, and Section 551.089 of the Open Meetings Act to deliberate 1, security assessments or deployments related to information resources technology. 2, network security information as described by Government Code Section 2059.055B. Or 3, the deployment or specific occasions for implementation of security personnel, critical infrastructure, or security devices. B, to deliberate regarding the following positions: General Manager, CEO, Central and Lower Basin Regional Manager, Chief Financial Officer, Chief Technology Officer, Deputy General Manager, Environmental and Compliance Manager, General Counsel, Human Resources Manager, Legislative and Governmental Affairs Manager, Security Manager, Special Projects and Strategic Initiatives Manager, Technical Services Manager, Upper Basin Regional Manager, Water Services Manager pursuant to the authority granted by Section 551.074 of the Texas Open Meetings Act, codified by Chapter 551 of the Texas Government Code. If you are not specifically involved in the presentation of the first executive session agenda item, please excuse yourself from the boardroom at this time. With each executive session agenda All right, the Board of Directors hereby reconvenes into open session at 1:14 PM. There are no resolutions for us to consider. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn at this time. Judy Crone, and second by Director Huber. There's no further business of the board. We will adjourn at 1:15. Thank you, everybody. Have a safe trip home.